You're listening Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Congratulations to Venezuela winning their first national base or what is it, World Baseball Classic. Feel like we owed you that one. I was joking with Landon off the air. If Trump's president for 3 more years, any international sport we engaged in, there will probably be a reason why I feel a little bit of guilt towards the potential of beating them in any kind of sport. And you can add Venezuela to that list as a result of the way that this president's carrying himself. It's been a pretty action packed 24 hours. I'm going to be honest with you guys. We've got a lot of different topics that I want to jump into. I want to talk a little bit more about Joe Kent. That news was breaking just as I was getting on the air. So I really didn't have a lot of time to know who the guy was. Needless to say, based on the media circles that he runs with, I was not particularly familiar with him. But what's interesting is the way that that man has been covered for the last 24 hours for doing something that I think not a lot of people in government have the guts to do these days. I want to talk about energy creation and some questionable decisions coming out of the administration. Um, we got a law here in Wisconsin that it looks like sports betting is going to become legal and white people aren't going to be able to benefit from it, which has some people very upset about it. We've got polling data about whether or not Americans would rather see assistance given to workers losing their jobs from AI versus providing government assistance to these AI companies that goes the exact way you'd think, and so much more. So I hope you stick around for it. And for the record, I don't do legal talk on this show. It's not outside of, if I had a lawyer on locally to talk about their services. But in terms of courtroom drama or anything like that, I never really covered the Diddy trials. I didn't jump into the Trump trials, assuming that the MAGA movement is going to continue trying to arrest all of their political enemies. I'm not really going to be covering any of those trials in any kind of meaningful way. And I'm not going to cover this one either, but I do want to at least shine a spotlight on, if you guys have not been following along with the Afro Man trial, famously from Then I Got High, the song. It's probably the best thing happening on social media right now. And it's a shame that it had to happen. If you guys are unfamiliar with the story, a bunch of cops went into his house, broke his door down, pulled guns, cut his camera feed, took money out of his place. There were a lot of questionable things that took place. And the trial is kind of a bit of a catharsis for people acting with impunity that have power. Imagine if the police were wearing masks and we couldn't identify them. Now that would be really strange, wouldn't it? Could you imagine if a government-based agency were wearing masks and there were no way to identify when one of them was pointing an AR-15 at your child's head? Well, that would be irresponsible, and I'm sure we'd all stand up as Americans with one solid voice and say, "Take those masks off, you cowards." But it's nice to see um it's a catharsis at the very least to see an agency who oftentimes, isn't worried about repercussions, but running afoul of somebody, has a little bit of money. Afro Man's by no means, extravagantly wealthy, but he's made a little money on the handful of hits that he's made over the years. And I've been watching clips from that trial while prepping the show, and I have to say, it's an absolutely remarkable situation that's going on there right now. Um, but that's all I have to say about that, because again, that's not really, unless something wild happens in the Luigi trial, I doubt this is ever going to become a legal show. And I do want to shout out, I have a new listener of the program who found me via my YouTube live stream, which we are live on YouTube at Ben Cominos. Go ahead, check it out. Please subscribe. I need help. At Ben Cominos, all one word. Um, she's actually let me know. She's like, I'm not going to be able to listen and comment for the entire show today because I'm going to be taking people and helping them to register to vote at the DMV later today. It's the last day to register online in Wisconsin before the April 7th election. We have a referendum on the ballot. We have a handful of candidates on the ballot. So if you do want to take part, I would hope that a lot of people that listen to this show are already registered. But if you or someone you know is not in that boat as the audience is expanding, especially if you are listening to me terrestrially or at the very least locally, definitely want to take advantage of that today here. So I definitely appreciate that very much, and good on you for trying to actually enact the kind of change that we want to see in this system. And with that, let's get into the show proper here, shall we? And there's a bunch of different angles about how I wanted to start this show. And ironically enough, where I want to start this show is our neighbors to the south in Illinois. They had a primary season yesterday with some people winning. Now, I am not going to claim, outside of the one woman, Kat Abogazela, who I had been following along with before she had ever considered running for office because she was a journalist before then, I really didn't know much about the candidates. I'm not going to sit here and pontificate about the different variations of why I'm frustrated or why I'm happy that this candidate won or that candidate won. I obviously have opinions, but I try to be upfront with you guys when I let you know that when I'm kind of firing from the hip and when I have a thoroughly researched opinion about something here. I don't have an opinion about the people that won here today, but I do have an opinion about what took place there. And it ties into the Joe Kent story that we'll probably get into in the second segment here, because I want to kind of separate these two stories, even though they are related. In the Illinois races, this was a primary season. Now, it is a bit different because a primary in Illinois is basically the general election. Not too many of the people that came out of their primary yesterday are nervous about what's going to happen in the general election, right? It's essentially the same thing as a Republican primary in Alabama. It's the same principle. So it's not apples to apples about a primary in Wisconsin. Whoever becomes the gubernatorial candidate for the Democrats / Republicans is going to run one type of race during the primary, and then is going to have to run an entirely different kind of race during the general, right? So I think that's a fair way to break this conversation down. But here is something that I do have a well-informed opinion about in the election that happened yesterday. The Chicago Sun-Times has an analysis of super PAC spending in all of these Illinois races. Again, a primary. Just under 57 million, 56.9 million spent by super PACs on primary races, for state senator races, for House of Representatives races in the state of Illinois alone. $57 million. 19.9 coming from AIPAC and aligned groups. 14.1 coming from crypto, 2.5 million coming from AI, and 20.4 million coming from all other groups. Included in one thing is 20.4. It's barely 25% of the pot. So when you see an electoral process that does not reflect the values of the people doing the voting, these are the kind of numbers that stick out to me, that kind of highlight a problem that I think is worth discussing in a more in-depth way. What's more is some of these groups, specifically AIPAC, have realized, and I have a feeling AI is going to be right behind them. It's ironic. It's the American Israel PAC and it's the AI PAC. It's two AI PACs, which I find fascinating. But what AIPAC is running into right now, especially within the Democratic Party, is there is a toxicity associated with AIPAC. There is a toxicity associated with Israel right now. In fact, in the world standing, which has nothing to do with American politics, but in the world standing, America is in free fall in terms of popularity amongst the citizens of other countries. And the only place that is doing worse than America is Israel. And it's a similar kind of feature happening here within Democratic politics right now. And you're watching a lot of the higher ups in the Democratic Party trying to figure out how to square that circle. No offense, Republicans, but you can boast and pretend to be anti-war all you want, But at the end of the day, if a Republican candidate came up and told you we're doing war in the Middle East, I think if there's one thing that has been highlighted by the on average 89% favorability polling from MAGA, it's that you don't actually believe in being anti-war. It's that you believe in being anti-war when Sleepy Joe or Cackling Kamala are doing it. But when Dumpy Don's doing it, all of a sudden it's a brilliant move. 5D chess, Ben, you just don't get it. $20 million coming from AIPAC into these races, $2.5 million coming from AI that I think will be just as unpopular, and we will talk about that later in the show, but I believe it will be just as unpopular in the near future as AIPAC is here. But that 20 million number sticks out to me in a way that I think is worth highlighting. Since those elections happened, and again, I don't have any a dog in the fight in terms of who won these races. I have seen claims from some people saying the progressives still won. I've seen they're sympathetic towards Israel. I've seen that they're centrist. I've seen all this stuff. I do not have an opinion on the people that won. What I do have an opinion on is after the races were over and the smoke had cleared and the dust had settled, AIPAC posted to Twitter, this is 11 hours old at this point, being endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Ro Khanna, Justice Dems, and the Sunrise Movement was a kiss of death in Illinois. Democratic voters rejected their extreme anti-Israel candidates, instead choosing mainstream candidates. AIPAC is proud to help defeat 6 would-be squad members tonight. They also took the time to post, while disappointed that Laura Fine did not prevail. This is in the 9th Congressional District in Illinois. While disappointed that Laura Fine did not prevail, voters rejected 2 anti-Israel candidates in this race, Kat Abigazela and Bushra Amiwala. We were especially proud to help defeat Abigazela, who centered her campaign on attacking Israel and demonizing pro-Israel Americans. Now, I followed along with her campaign because, again, I knew her from before she was running, so I was interested to see how it worked out. Had she won, she would have been the youngest member in Congress ever, only 26 years old, which it feels like I was just 26 yesterday, but that's 12 years even younger than I am, which is kind of crazy, the idea that someone would be in Congress at that age. But it wasn't just about anti-Israel, but that was definitely a focal point of the conversation. But what I wanted to highlight for you guys, I'm talking to the liberals in the audience right now, but I think everybody can understand the frustration coming from this right now. Picture if instead of being a no-name Democrat from Illinois that you have no feelings about one way or the other, picture if this were about Hillary Clinton losing in 2016. And then picture there were a super PAC focused on Russia who took to American social media companies and started posting excited tweets about how their money was able to sway elections. Thank goodness these liberal candidates were unable to win as a result of our money and social media influence, and we were able to get some level-headed orange Republicans in there that are going to do the things that we want to see happen. How many of you guys would be taking that in stride, and how many of you guys would start a 4-year campaign saying that the election was rigged? I actually already know the answer, because Russia didn't have to donate a whole bunch of money into our elections or boast about it in such a flagrant and obvious way on social media. And there were still a lot of you that were ready to engage in those kind of behaviors. AIPAC isn't even trying to pretend what they're doing. They're squashing progressive candidates, Medicare for all candidates, tax the rich candidates, redistribute the wealth candidates, in the name of making sure that blue MAGA candidates reign supreme in the ballot box, not really worrying about how it impacts Americans in the country, in the state, in the district. But as long as they're willing to continue funneling our money to Israel, that's okay. And there is not a single peep coming from anybody within the liberal establishment about outside influence, foreign influence buying our elections. The fact that this is legal is mind-blowing. And it's even more mind-blowing because I know how you all reacted post 2016 saying that Russia, because of some memes that a bunch of 14-year-olds wouldn't have fallen for during the 2016 election, convinced some of our grandparents to vote for Donald Trump instead of Hillary Clinton. That's fine. And I see I have one message in the YouTube chat there saying that they're bummed about Cat as well. I was following along with that one. I was disappointed by that. But again, no, at the end of the day, I speak with Patty Vasquez down in Chicago pretty regularly, and she'll tell you that there's a lot of corruption just because Republicans really don't have a chance to win in Illinois. It kind of really opens the door for Democratic corruption in that state, which is just as bad as Republican corruption, although you'd be forgiven for not realizing that. This should be larger news, and it ties into a bigger story that we're going to do in the next segment. But this should be larger news. We should be angry about this. A foreign entity is influencing our elections, not to the benefit of us in any way, but making sure that the bombs and money never stop going to Israel, that is. And that should bother us. There's a lot of candidates that have been receiving AIPAC money that are taking a beating. And believe you me, before November 2026 is over, there will be a lot more to add to that list. I would highlight focusing on the main Senate race as it gets closer. But I at least wanted to highlight this because I can look at this objectively. Apparently, the person that beat Abba Gazela is also a progressive, also did not take money from AIPAC, but doesn't go as far as saying the genocide needs to stop, the weapons need to stop, the money needs to stop, but did not take money from any of these AIPAC or AIPAC-related groups. But $57 million being funneled into a state race should beg the question, does what we think or want even matter when you're seeing that kind of money get funneled in? And you're going to see that happen in this state in the coming months. The only reason we're not seeing it happen in the Wisconsin, in the Supreme Court race, as Jason and I were kind of speculating about on Friday, is because I think the Republican Party is throwing all their chips into the Tom Tiffany or potentially Tommy Thompson run for governor in Wisconsin, and kind of has chucked the Supreme Court race up to a loss. Otherwise, we'd be dealing with the exact same thing here. It's a strange thing to watch happen, and it's even stranger to watch the silence, especially given the reaction to Russia's influence in 2016, or to be perfectly frank, lack thereof. Ben says, not me. I'm assuming that's in regards to being anti-war despite Trump being in office, which is great, Ben, but unfortunately, you're 2 of 20 people that make up MAGA. And I do this show for everybody. So MAGA is absolutely pro-war. There's no way around it. As long as Dumpy Don is doing the warring, everybody else is on point with what's happening there. Cynthia says several candidates who refused AIPAC money did come close to winning in Chicago. One woman named Irvin who took AIPAC money lost, and I'm so happy. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be examples of everything going on. I mean, Mamdani beat it. There's more examples if you stop and think about it. But I think it's just the principle of it is what bothers me. It's beatable, obviously, but it's the principle of it that is frustrating, that someone outside of America has such a large influence on what's happening inside of America. That should be frustrating to all of us, even the Republicans who don't care what happened in a Democratic primary in Illinois. Like, that should bother all of us. Brian out in Fremont says, you're telling me that if I take their money, I have to vote their way, because if I learned anything from this administration, so sorry, suckers. What you're pointing out now is how ridiculous politics is, blatant in-your-face corruption. I mean, Brian, don't get me wrong. I wish there'd be some people that have the guts to take their money, because, I mean, you can take their money and just do the exact opposite. Be like, I appreciate your endorsement in the form of dollars, but just so you know, this isn't going to change my mind. I'm sure there's a lot of shady behind the scenes deals that go on. What I can tell you right now is, and I guess I have a little bit of experience in this, doing a radio show that comes with endorsements and sponsorships, and I have a very strict "don't touch my content" rule if anybody wants to take part in the program. And there's people that buy into it, and I appreciate them even more. And then you guys know that I kind of have that vetting process. And if anybody were to try and change what the show is, I would have an issue with that. It's the same principle with elected officials, right? You should expect them, even if they take money from the NRA. That's absolutely fine. I think people that have done domestic violence in their life shouldn't have access to guns because it shows a very high predisposition towards gun violence if you've assaulted your spouse in the past. I would like to see that bill become legislation. You could give me $10, you could give me $1,000,000 as a pro-gun lobby. I would have that philosophy. You'd never hear me say ban all the guns. You'd never hear me say any of that kind of stuff. Not because they paid me, but because it's what I believe. It shouldn't be difficult, but I feel like once you see the money in front of you, it's very hard to ignore. I'm not giving an excuse for these people, but you know, tell me I'm wrong. Larry says 100 million was spent in Wisconsin Supreme Court race. I believe that was last year, the Crawford Schimmel race, which was a new national record. And you're exactly right. And I see someone asking if they can drop links in the chat. Yes, please do. Any that's in the YouTube chat. Drop any links that help people get more engaged and more involved. That's what this is all about. So please do, if you have those kind of resources, get them out there. And again, you can follow that at Ben Cominos if you're looking for those links. So I want to tie this Apex story in with a conversation about the resignation in the counterterrorism unit for Donald Trump with Joe Kent. And we're going to do that on the other side of the break and dive into what he said, the people he ran with, which is cause for concern, but then the way the media is covering it. I noticed it before I even left the building. It's why it's in my promo. And it only got stranger as the day went. And I want to show you guys what I mean. Just a couple minutes, though. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Jerry says the money in politics is toxic. To fix our political culture, it must be reformed. It didn't used to be like this. No, exactly. I mean, the statistics are all out there. I don't think we've done a segment about it because I see them and then like 45 other stories get funneled in front of me and I have to pick like 6 that we're going to do over the course of 2 hours. But you're absolutely not wrong. And it's going to take an overturn of Citizens United. I mean, again, much like war in Iran, that's polling essentially in the negative direction at 70%. Citizens United might be one of the only things that polls worse than that. Again, that's assuming that people know what Citizens United is, which they almost certainly don't. But if you said to them money in politics, they'd be like, "Oh no, that sucks. We need to get rid of that part of it right there." I mean, part of what, and like some of you aren't going to want to hear this, but part of what allowed for Zoran to be able to win in New York is that New York City has publicly funded campaigns. If we got to the point where tax dollars were used to fund campaigns and then everybody just gets the same pool of tax dollars to play with and you can't take donations outside of that, you just have to figure out the most strategic way to do it. Well, that says something, doesn't it? That's how somebody polling at 1% is able to end up winning an election. that's kind of how that works. So I'm not saying, like, I realize this is just another thing that our tax dollars are now going to be funneled into, but definitely some cause for concern, and it's something to just kind of address an issue that I think is bothering a lot of people, at least that follow along with this kind of stuff. I will tell you, like, I follow some channels online that show you like interviews with people, and I know they edit them so that the absolute dumbest people on the planet ultimately make it into that video. And I realize that there's dozens of examples of the same questions being asked and people just giving very common sense and straightforward answers. Like, I understand the games that they are trying to play, but some of the answers about the war in Iran and money in politics and so many of these things are just debilitating. And like the worst part is that I see 20-something-year-old Ben in some of the answers that I'm getting or that I'm hearing, and it's a lot to take in. I remember very vividly I was dating a girl when I was 20 years old. I was about to turn 21 and I was out to dinner with her parents, and that was when Obama and McCain were running against one another. It was going to be the first presidential election that I could vote in. He was asking who I was going to vote for. I said Obama. He asked me for a reason, and very easily he was able to get me to contradict myself because at 20, 21 years old, I knew, oh, young people vote for Democrats. I'm a social liberal, but a fiscal conservative, right? The thing that people say when they don't understand anything about politics. And I remember we were at a dinner table and I ordered the most expensive thing on the menu, and the dad called me out for doing that, which was really awkward. And like he asked me the question, I gave him an answer, and 5 minutes later he was able to catch me contradicting myself. And then I was like, well, you got me. I really don't have anything to say beyond that. But you listen how stupid people are. And like when I go home to Pittsburgh and I'm meeting like peripheral people, not my friends, but like the friends that my brother has made, and they're telling me 5-minute stories about something trans, and they have no idea what Citizens United is. I sometimes sit there, and I love democracy and I love the way it works, but there are moments when I sit there and I'm like, man, this guy's vote counts just as much as mine, and he hasn't stopped talking about a man that transitioned to a woman and wasn't forced to cut his hair when he got a job as a blackjack dealer at the casino. And for the last 5 minutes, and I can't care less about what this guy's talking about. But you are not wrong, Jerry. You are not wrong. And I realize the people that listen to this show understand that it's a matter of getting it in the minds and hearts of the people that are maybe peripheral politics peoples. Jerry also highlights that New York primaries have the mayoral primary also has ranked choice voting as well. Very good point, and I think that's worth highlighting too. But God forbid you're able to make the choice you want. They want you feeling pigeonholed into making that choice that you really don't care for. Okay, so with that, let's go into the world of Joe Kent now. We just wrapped up a conversation about AIPAC, and undue influence, $20 million in primaries in Illinois, let alone what they're intending to do otherwise across this nation. And again, watch it get funneled into Janet Mills, and then when Graham Plattner beats her in the primary in Maine, then watch it get funneled into Susan Collins. They don't care about the politics of the person outside of will the bombs and money continue being funneled into Israel, despite the fact that 70% at least of the Democratic Party doesn't want to see that happen. And it's very clear to me that something has changed in the discourse. I had a friend of mine, let me actually see here. I believe she messaged me via Facebook Messenger, but I had a friend kind of say that we're living in crazy town right now, in order to paraphrase, because we're living in a world right now where liberals are resharing Marjorie Taylor Greene conversations, right? They're showing you Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about how no one wants to send their children to die for Israel, how Israel's untoward influence on American politics goes a bridge too far, and she wants to see it stop. And a lot of Democrats are like, and quite frankly, count me among them, even though I'm registered a Democrat. I wouldn't count myself a Democrat. But in terms of people that really don't agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene economically, please allow me to say with a full throat, if you haven't heard anyone else say this yet, it's pretty embarrassing that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson are usurping any kind of momentum that the alleged anti-war Democratic Party could possibly be capitalizing on right now, because they don't have the guts to stand up to the AIPAC lobby, to the Israel lobby. It's very embarrassing that the Jewish space lasers lady, that the weirdest laugh in all of conservative talk, are leading the way in calling out the flagrant hypocrisy and the lack of interest coming from the American population. Now, Joseph Kent was the top counterterrorism official under Trump, below Tulsi Gabbard, who, if you didn't know, used to sell shirts and make money on no war with Iran, gave the most milquetoast centrist fence-sitting answer about Joe Kent's resignation yesterday that only enraged people further. I believe she's getting grilled on Capitol Hill today. Not about this, of course. Maybe a handful of people might actually work up the guts to ask about it. But again, it's not going to be from the perspective of we shouldn't be involved in Israel's noise. It's going to be from the perspective of, boy, doesn't Trump suck at being president, which is the only thing Democrats know how to do. Most of which, I should say. Bernie Sanders comes out saying Joe Kent, a top counterterrorism official under Trump, just resigned. Kent and I don't agree on much, but he is right. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. For the record, that sentiment is corroborated by Caroline Leavitt herself, having posted last week when calling out ABC News that Israel does not and has never posed a threat to the American homeland. So the idea that that is what pushed us into this is laughable. Marco Rubio, I played the sound of it, said that we did this because an attack from Israel was imminent, and if had we not joined the attack, we would have been caught with our pants down, so we decided to take part in it as well. There's really not a lot of wiggle room for what is being said here. Donald Trump has said as much. Joe Kent said as much. Marco Rubio said as much. Caroline Leavitt said that there was no direct threat posed by Israel. Meanwhile, you turn on MSNBC, you turn on CNN, and they're like, man, it's crazy. It's a crazy conspiracy theory to say that we did this because of Israel. And I don't understand where they're getting their information from, or who actually is still falling for this in 2026. This guy, Joe Kent, is out there, and I'll be the first one to admit that. I tend to give people the benefit of the doubt because, as someone who has been labeled anti-Semitic, as someone who has been labeled a racist, as someone who has been labeled Islamophobic, because of the segments that I do on this show, when I know I harbor no ill will towards any population of people in my heart or in the actions that I engage in, I am just giving the news with my point of view. I know that label is bandied about quite a bit, that it is thrown around at people that do not deserve to have it levied against them. It most certainly is levied against people that deserve it. There's a percentage of people that hated Obama for being a black man, but if you lost your home while watching bank CEOs get 8-figure bonus salaries guaranteed by the American taxpayer, I think you could have a legitimate reason for being frustrated with Obama and Democrats without it being that you're racist or sexist, right? Both of those things can exist in the same world. And I'm not a fool to say that. But when Nick Fuentes does a segment where he says women need to shut the bleep up and stay in the kitchen, and black people should be in jail, and the rest of us would be living in a utopia, that's a racist, sexist piece of crap. And like it's not hard for me to say. So when Joe Kent is throwing his lot in with Nick Fuentes, that's hard for me to jump over. And I've stated as much. I think Nick Fuentes does a good job of calling out the uniparty. I said if you got rid of all the hatred for women and minorities, it basically is outside the box from a conservative perspective. It's just that, acceptance and anti-bigotry is a pretty big part of this program. So it's not apples to apples, to say the very least. But the principles are still there. And so what you're seeing liberal media do, and conservative media, of course, is just pretending like this guy was a crackpot. Donald Trump said he was going to fire him anyway. That's all BS, and anybody falling for that is too far gone for me to convince them otherwise, so I'm not going to bother wasting my breath trying to do so now. But when you watch liberal media and the way they talk about this guy, the way they talk about the circles he ran in, the media that he did, and by the way, Joe Kent ultimately did end up disavowing Nick Fuentes exactly for being racist, and he said he doesn't fit in with my inclusive right-wing populism that I am trying to build. And Nick Fuentes worked overtime to make sure that Joe Kent lost his election in Washington. All of this is stuff that I have learned in the last 24 hours about Joe Kent, somebody who I knew nothing about 26 hours ago. I have learned quite a bit about, but not from watching news media. Because the second he said, I am not going to take part in this war that has obviously been forced upon us because of Israeli interests, all of a sudden he became the villain. And you have right-wingers agreeing with Bernie Sanders, and you have liberals agreeing with Marjorie Taylor Greene about their assessment about what's going on in the Middle East. And yet our media and our elected officials are both playing dumb and pretending like, where did he get this idea that we're doing this because of Israel? It's a laughable assertion where we find ourselves today. It's a laughable situation, I should say, where we find ourselves today. And I realize there's a certain demographic that exclusively gets their news from the TV. They don't read, they don't go on social media, they turn on CNN, they turn on Fox, they turn on MSNBC, and that is where they get their news. That demo is shrinking by the hour, but there are people that will fall for that. I'm just hopeful that it is not a large enough number for it to continue impacting elections in the way that it has been. We've had somebody waiting on hold for a while now. Anybody else wants to chime in? 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Call or text in. I got some text piling up too. We'll do call first. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, I appreciate you doing what you're doing right now, because I believe that a lot of the people that have been moving around has been political repositioning. But Joe Kent, to me, is the little thread of the unraveling of the damage that has been caused by the war, and people heading for the exits before they end up at The Hague. I seriously believe that this isn't a reposition. This is I'm out of here, and anybody else that hangs around, you're on your own.
I feel like it's a matter of, like, pick any organization, whether it's a company, a social gathering, pick whatever you want. I feel like there are people at the top of any operation that don't believe anything they say, and they just say whatever will get them into a position of power that they are looking to acquire. But in that action of gaining power, they end up recruiting, depending on the size. It could be tens, it could be hundreds, it could be millions, depending on the size of the operation. Pick a number of people that actually buy into the messaging that's out there. I believe caller Ben when he says, I am anti-war and I voted for Donald Trump to be anti-war, and this is absolutely not what I voted for. And I
Exactly.
think Joe Kent is one of those. I don't think he's running from anything. I thought he was actually part of an anti-war movement. The guy lost his wife to a bombing in Syria in 2019. He has more reason than most to want to avoid this outcome for thousands of other people going through the same process. And I think when you see this happen, I don't think he's running away from repercussions or anything like that. I think, having never met the guy, I'm playing psychologist now, I think he's disgusted with the way things are playing out. He doesn't want his name associated with it. And as people often say, this ain't what I signed up for. And he finds himself leaving now.
See, we've got 5,000, the way I'm seeing it, we got 5,000 Marines heading for a land incursion on the island. I'm not sure what they call it, Kyoto or
Karg.
the one where they refill the tankers.
Yeah.
We have 5,000 people that are going to be boots on in about a week and a half. And I don't want to be a part of it. I didn't even like this war in the first place. There are a lot of people that are standing there going, well, we put boots on the ground, this whole thing changes.
Absolutely. And what sucks, Brian, is, and I don't want to say this to you because I know you take this show to heart and I respect that, but like we're hitting a point now where it's either boots on the ground or a worse outcome that I'm not going to say out loud yet because I don't want to say it, but I don't know how, like, if you do not win this, you have set the precedent now that anytime anyone is when Iran gets out of, or excuse me, when Israel gets out of pocket again, assuming we, America, back off, anytime Israel is throwing its weight around again, Iran's going to say, hey, the Strait of Hormuz is closing until you guys stop Israel from doing this. Like, clearly we've found a pain point now due to the president's lack of planning and inability to actually do the job that has kind of opened the door for Iran to walk all over us. And without coming away with this with some kind of actual victory, not in the eyes of Americans, but in the eyes of Iranians, then it's going to continue. So whether that's boots on the ground or whether that's something much worse, I know
where you're going with this, but there's no out. There's no out of this. We can't beat a country three times the size of Iraq with a lot more people than Iraq had, that are a lot more dedicated to the 4,000 years of civilization that they have. This is going to be I don't know how to. You're not going to get out of this.
Yeah.
I don't see how you're going to get out of this except for somebody maybe saying, "Hey, we made a big mistake," pulling back and just and saying, we made a mistake. I don't see that happening in this administration. I think there's way too much pride on the line, and and they're not going to eat their pride.
Yeah, so it might be right, Brian, and I appreciate the call, man. And like realistically, I don't even know that mea culpa is going to work here because I don't know how much you guys follow this stuff in foreign media and things like that, but in Lebanon and in Beirut, we're basically doing a 9/11 a day. I watched footage from last night of a civilian building in Beirut, super tall, just come crashing down as a result of bombs lobbed by both America and Israel. And at this stage of the game, we're talking about casualties that we really don't even have much reporting on right now. I'm not going to speculate where we're at. And so I don't know. This feels like a poorly planned excursion that I don't know how we get out of this while avoiding violence. And it's a shame we're even in this position. It's an even larger shame that we're in this position for completely avoidable reasons. It's even a further shame that 90% of MAGA is pretending that this is a brilliant idea when we know damn well exactly how they'd be reacting if Kamala Harris did this. It's a shame, and there's no other way for me to describe it. But it's crazy. It's absolute nonsense. But I appreciate that call from Brian. And again, you guys know me. I think a lot of the media is designed to get you guys scared. and nervous about what's going on in the world. And we cover some heavy stuff, but I always try and put like a lighthearted sheen on it because I don't believe you should be walking around scared every day. There's only so much that we can do as individuals. But at the same time, I don't like where this is headed, and whether it's more loss of military life or it's loss of civilian life, we are headed on a trajectory that I do not see an off ramp from. And I have more thoughts about this, but we're kind of pressing up against it here. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of a longer break here. I messed. I'm trying to do the 3 segments in the first hour, but man plans, God laughs. But what we'll do is we're going to go to a quick break. And when we come back, we'll put a bow on this conversation. There's plenty more that I want to jump into as well outside of Iran. But I figured this is worth talking about because Lord knows the media is not going to get into it. And I see DSL on there as well. I will get that message in there. But I do have to put a pin in it here. And we'll be back on the other side of the news. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on Political Voices Network and WHBY. Listen, Wisconsin, we're not warm yet, but melting days and freezing nights mean water is on the move and your sump pump is about to get busy. Water damage is one of the top reasons homeowners file insurance claims, so do yourself a favor and avoid the headache altogether. Test your sump pump today and call Tim Roush and his team. Use that free text line that I've been telling you guys about the last couple months. They can help keep your basement dry and protected. Head to timroushplumbing.com for that text line and more info. That's Roush Plumbing, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. All right, we're back. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box, WHBY, Political Voices Network, all the good things. Catch me on YouTube, maybe on TikTok, so on and so forth. All at Ben Cominos, all one word. Beautiful part about having my name is no one else has it. It's just Dominoes with a C. Go find me, please. Then go tell 5 of your friends. Thank you. You guys are doing a great service. By the way, shout out to Lynn, who messaged me during the last segment, saying, FYI, about to get on a flight. Small world. Met another huge fan of your show. Logan says, hi, we are missing today's show, but we will listen on the app. That's absolutely awesome. I don't know how I came up in conversation, but I am thrilled that it happened, and it put a smile on my face in an otherwise very dreary first hour of this program. So thank you for sharing that. If you're just joining us, we started off the conversation showing money's influence in politics. There was a not very much talked about, that was probably not the best way to say it. There was an under-discussed, there we go, primary in Illinois that took place yesterday. And I kind of broke down super PAC spending coming from APAC, coming from crypto groups, coming from artificial intelligence, as well as another group just called everything else that isn't one of those three things, and kind of showing just how much money influences this kind of thing. $57 million into a primary in a deep, deep, deep blue state, because party doesn't matter as long as you're getting the outcomes, as long as you're getting that unchecked regulation for AI operations, as long as cryptocurrency is allowed to continue rug pulling rubes who are looking to make a quick buck, as long as the American government is willing to take our tax dollars, not invest it into education or healthcare or elder care or child care or fixing the infrastructure or any of the things we talk about. As long as you're going to send that money to bombs in Israel, cool. We'll make sure you get your election, and you have plenty of money to spend as a result of it. There's a lot of consternation surrounding that, lots of frustration. No one really making it a campaign issue. And I'm going to be honest, you'd probably waka away with a victory if you ran on some of these things in any kind of meaningful way. We then tied this into the coverage of Joe Kent, who, from a media perspective, is no friend of mine, but from a perspective of why he resigned, having the guts to take your career in your own hands and do what you think is right in regards to the future of your career. Well, that's something else entirely. And it seems like he had the guts to do something that not a lot of other people in Trump's sphere have the guts to do. And I talked a little bit about who he is, why there's some frustration with him, but very specifically, the way people in the media, specifically liberal media, are talking about the conspiracy that Israel forced us into this war. And we kind of ended on a bit of a darker note, because I don't see a way out of this conflict without escalating the violence further. Because even if Donald Trump does what I think is the Trumpian move of just declaring victory and leaving and being like, yeah, no, we won, and knowing damn well that the 90% of people that support this war would then all, we won, just parroting whatever it is their orange dad president says, that would set a precedent that any time that Iran wanted something, they could just close the strait. Really quick side note, and then we'll get to these text messages. I grew up with a dad who taught me a lot of very important life lessons, and one of them was in regards to relationships. And he told me, probably too young, but that's fine. Better to learn it young than never. And he would say, Ben, he probably actually said Benjamin, because when I was a child, my parents called me Benjamin. He'd say, Benjamin, anytime you're offered an ultimatum, whether it is in a relationship or whether that's in a in a business or whatever the situation is, the second you are offered an ultimatum, turn around and go the other way. Because as soon as you acknowledge that that ultimatum is going to work, do this or you're not going to get that promotion that you've been eyeing, do this or the relationship's over. The second you do this, you have now set the precedent that that threat is going to get you to do whatever thing you were stubbornly pushing back against. Maybe you're in the right, maybe you're in the wrong. That's not the point of the conversation. The fact is, once an ultimatum is proposed, you can't ever back off or you can't give in, because you have just set the precedent that that ultimatum is going to be enough to bring you to the table. I use that principle in sales. I use that principle in my life every single day. I think it's very important. If we bail now, and by we, I mean the American military brought about by Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran and nothing else, nothing about Joe Biden or anything else. This is specifically a Republican problem. No matter how much they're going to try and spin that otherwise, this is specifically a Republican problem. They can't allow this Strait of Hormuz ultimatum to ultimately dictate American foreign policy, because Israel is going to act out again. Over 750,000 people have been displaced in Lebanon. People are dying there pretty regularly. That's 10% of their population, by the way. 7.5 million people out there. 750,000 are currently displaced by an Israeli bombing campaign that really isn't getting a lot of media coverage, but it's a conspiracy theory, and you might be anti-Semitic if you say that Israel's actions are bringing us into war in the Middle East. So be careful not to say those things. If you establish that closing the Strait of Hormuz will get America to do what you want them to do, because they really don't care, our government that is, about the loss of life, but they absolutely care about the loss of dollars for one of the 7 companies that still exist. So if you establish that that works, that is going to be the move going forward. And the next time Israel wants to bomb Lebanon or Gaza or Iran or any of their neighbors, because they're kind of sociopathic that way, watch the strait close and watch it be thrown at our feet saying, yo, you got to tell Israel to stop doing this. And if they won't, then maybe cut off the weapons supply, because we're going to cut the oil supply off otherwise. And that's going to be an issue going forward. And what's worse, I don't know if you've noticed, but our president's kind of stupid. And what's worse is that he has offered $1 billion, $1 billion with a B, to block offshore windmill farms. It's available in the failing New York Times right now. Trump is currently in the middle of weighing a new plan to stop offshore wind farms from being built. The new idea is offering $1 billion to the wind developers to cancel their projects and agree to develop fossil gas projects in Texas. This goes back to the $100 million that Donald Trump received from the oil and gas industry, but it's not corruption because Hunter Biden wasn't involved, because I'm stupid. It's remarkable that this guy gets away with this stuff, but I'm kind of done trying to convince MAGA to use the 5 brain cells they have left. Go ahead and be partisan. That's a you guys problem. I'm going to continue doing this the correct way. But in an energy crisis, you would think our big-brained 5D chess playing president might have the foresight to be like, maybe we should start to develop other sources of technology, because even though we are energy independent from a fossil fuel perspective, fuel is priced on the worldwide level. And whether that's because of the petrodollar, I'm looking for an expert to come and talk to me about this. I haven't found a person yet, but we're going to get someone, because I'm kind of confused. And Carlos and I were talking about why our prices go up, even though we really aren't importing much from the Strait of Hormuz. But given the way that this stuff works, you would think that a president playing 5D chess would be like, oh, well, let's make sure that we have the infrastructure developed to start getting solar and wind off the ground so that we're not beholden strictly to oil. And while this isn't going to provide us a solution in the immediate future, it will be a long-term solution for a problem that is only going to get worse. And based on the way that this conflict is progressing, this probably isn't going to be the last time that the Strait of Hormuz is used as a bargaining chip. And you can thank our Orange Dad president for doing so. prove it to me I'm wrong, because I see the writing on the wall, and I would think that most people with a couple of IQ points to rub together also see it that way as well. Now, DSL had said, unfortunately, there's always been a way around that. You could do an interview that gets pulled by a network brass, but blame something else and then get more views on the internet and tons of free PR. Oh, absolutely. That's I think that's why James Tellerico ended up winning his primary in Texas, is because the what's his name, Brandon Carr with the FCC tried to pull that interview with Tellerico because the Republican Party is nervous about what that dude represents. And I'll tell you right now, not in a million years would I have watched the James Tellerico Stephen Colbert interview if it just aired and everything went according to plan. But it was the act of pulling it that had me like, well, wait a minute. Well, wait a minute. Why are you pulling this? What did he say in this? And for the record, it was a very milquetoast, influential interview. I really don't even remember what was said. But I do not watch Stephen Colbert. I haven't watched him since I gave him a little bit of a shot once he went into late night. But I knew once he was off the Colbert Report, it was going to be a worse version of him, and I was accurate. But yeah, you're exactly right. Or you can take on this show, when I rarely do interviews, it's typically a 20 to 30-minute interview. You can clip 60 seconds from that interview to prove a point that absolutely has nothing to do with what the conversation was actually about. So there's really no way around it, but I do get your point. Sharon says it will end, that being the conflict in Iran, when the fearless leader will declare victory, and we will be back where we started, minus at least 13 American military personnel and thousands of innocents who had nothing to do with this. We didn't learn anything in Afghanistan. We will not learn anything from this. Iran is highly mountainous and much larger than Iraq. If we put boots on the ground, this will not end well. And realistically, Sharon, I use Afghanistan as the example when people try and talk Republicans into giving their guns away. I'm always like, they're always like, well, you and your AR-15 aren't going to do anything about drones. And my response is always, well, tell that to the Taliban, because I think they probably have a different perspective on how well their AK-47s did against drones. So, not to say that they had a great life for 20 years, but I mean, we saw how that ultimately ended, and that's definitely some food for thought there as well. And I appreciate you sharing. And I saw Joe, who has served, say, note, I'm totally against the war and current administration lies and policies, but when they say that America was being threatened, does he actually mean the whole land, or the 19 to 24 military post-military stations in the area that had already been hit? Well, I mean, that's a fair assessment. And that's probably the kind of doublespeak, and I'm not accusing you of doublespeak, Joe, that they'll probably use just because Caroline Leavitt a week ago, in order to dunk on ABC, said there was no threat posed to the homeland, and there never was, which people are clinging to. And now that Joe Kent has resigned, saying that this was not brought about by a threat to America, but more so by the actions of Israel, Caroline Leavitt is now saying that there absolutely was a threat to American interests. But she could rely on that because the original tweet did say homeland, and the second one just was to America in general. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the path they take. You'll never convince me, just because, again, we have the audio of Marco Rubio specifically saying, and I've played it a couple times now on this show, specifically saying the reason why we ended up in this conflict to begin with. And the fact that so many people, specifically in liberal media, are now trying to pretend that, no, you're kind of misinterpreting what we meant when we said that. Well, it's hard for me to square that circle. Let me see. I label my things very poorly. Let me see if this was the audio of him saying that.
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not.
Okay, so there's plenty more, and I can let you listen to the entire thing. We played it a couple of times on this show, though. But just even that first part, this is from the Secretary of State in the Trump administration.
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us.
Here's the rest of it, just so you guys don't think I'm obfuscating.
And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen, and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
And I do get that logic, because, and I've shared this before, depending on the outcome, depending on what it is that a particular party wants to see happen. I always use the example when Obama was running against John McCain. Liberals were the ones that said they wanted a young, fresh set of eyes on the political landscape, whereas conservatives were the ones saying we need the steady hand to guide the ship that's been in politics for decades. Then Trump and Hillary ran, and it was liberals who wanted the steady hand to guide the ship of politics. And it was conservatives saying that they were the ones that wanted a fresh set of eyes on the political landscape. And realistically, they didn't mean any of the stuff they were saying. They just needed to say whatever was necessary to score political points in that particular moment. And I do believe there are elements of mainstream media that, had we not joined Israel in the attack and America and our outposts had been attacked, would be questioning them for that. And that's on them to have to answer for. But I do think if you ran as the anti-war president and then find yourself doing this, well, you're going to have to answer some questions, and you shouldn't expect anything other than what we're dealing with there. So, I mean, we're watching the us kind of steamroll into a future that so few of us actually want to see happen, not really seeing an off-ramp. And I'm already predicting a future, God willing, we're not still in this conflict in 2029, but I can see a future where obviously the Democrat wins because this entire administration has been trashed. Trust me, to my chagrin, this entire administration has been trashed, and some milquetoast centrist is going to end up winning in 2028, whether it's Newsom or Buttigieg or some other dark horse candidate. Doesn't matter. Outcome's the same. And then it will be March of 2029, and the same MAGA conservatives livid or thrilled that Donald Trump is putting an end to a 47-year war, will be livid that the Democratic president is not able to get us out of the conflict 3 months into their presidency. And I'm already envisioning that outcome, and I really don't know that I have the mental bandwidth to deal with it, but it's a very real issue that is on my mind, trust me, as I prep these shows every single day. And we're really not seeing the president take this seriously, because you can 5D chess till the cows come home. This is a confused man who either was or was not briefed on the potential levers that could be pulled by Iran post-attack, and either did not take those warnings seriously or was not briefed on them at all. And I'm willing to bet it's not the latter. So it seems to me that that Donald Trump did not take the threat seriously, didn't understand the capabilities, because again, I think a lot of the world is waking up to the idea that you can spend all of your healthcare money and education money on having enough bombs to blow up the surface area of the earth 7,700 times over. Not an exaggeration, by the way. To blow up the surface area of the earth 7,700 times over. But a handful of landmines and $5,000 drones can keep that $1 trillion at bay very easily. And I think Trump, along with a lot of people who support him, have a childish attitude towards how, and this is coming from someone that's never served, mind you, but just understands that life is very rarely ever as cut and dry, as black and white, as so many people would have you believe. I think we're learning a lesson very quickly here that people have caught up to us. I always use the football example to prove my point, and I always mess up the guy's name. Is it Cliff Lee? There was a Dallas Cowboys receiver in the 60s who ran like a 4.2 40 when nobody was doing that. And he absolutely helped set the Dallas Cowboy offense apart from everyone else who didn't have a 4.2 speed player on their team. And then you flash forward 40 years later. Now, if you run less than a 4.3 as a receiver, you better be over 6'5", because everybody's running that fast. And the idea that someone be like, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have a really good chance of winning the Super Bowl next year. See how fast that one receiver they have is? Well, everybody's fast now. It's not the 60s anymore. And it's the same idea with defense. We have the fanciest toys. We have the most toys, but it's by no means the one-sided conversation that it once was. And it takes a guy that avoided the draft by making up Bone Spurs stuff in order to be able to think like a child. I think I used this example last week. There's a very famous philosopher, or at least it's a famous individual who put this philosophy out there, saying that he believes a lot of what goes on in the world of politics is from the perspective that everybody is 12 years old. And if you look at it from the perspective that everyone has the mindset of a 12-year-old, you understand politics so much more. And then you watch war videos coming out with Saul Goodman and Tony Stark and the video games that I grew up on, and a bunch of trained SEALs clapping along with whatever dumbass thing the president's going to do next. You're like, yeah, maybe everyone is 12. There's a lot of credence to that claim. The more we move along here. David says we are between a rock and a hard place. If Trump did not surround himself with sycophants, we would have been advised to not enter this war. We are screwed again. I'll be honest with you, man. I don't think it's a matter of the sycophants. I think, and I've stated this before, I think we were on a one-way track to this outcome. I think there was no other outcome that would be seen by the regardless of who were in office, whether it was Nikki Haley, I think we're doing this in Iran, whether it were Kamala Harris, I think we're doing this in Iran. I don't think it's a matter of the sycophants. To be perfectly honest with you, David, I think some of the people he surrounded himself with probably tried to talk him out of it. And then when they failed, they just kind of disappeared. You notice how quiet J.D. Vance has been since it? You realize how Tulsi Gabbard really doesn't say anything anymore? There's a reason why. They don't buy into this either. And it's not a matter of the sycophants. I think it's the matter of the military-industrial complex owning everything. Bob Hayes, Bullet Bob Hayes. Thank you, Jerry. That's who I'm thinking of. What did I say? Cliff Lee. I don't know who that is. I think that's also a receiver, maybe. But the principle still stands. But yeah, so I mean, that's where I'm coming from on that. Brian saying this is so much like Back to the Future. Everything has gone to crap, and I can trace it back to February 28th. I think we are I think we're simplifying it a little bit more here. I'm not willing to say this is exclusively a Trump thing, but I am saying Trump is in office. It's kind of like how I didn't believe that the Republican Party had become the peace party, but given the fact that the liberals were in charge when the genocide was happening, when the conflict in Ukraine was allowed to exacerbate, and we were funneling our tax dollars into making sure that that conflict continued, I didn't have a leg to stand on. It is now a matter of MAGA snapping out of it, which they won't, and saying, son of a gun, I really don't like liberal politics, but I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Republican Party is just as war hungry as the Democratic Party is in trying to find a way to a new path forward. That is the best outcome that we can see here. And it's a matter, I'll tell you right now. So I post on TikTok a handful of times a day now, and it's really good content that everybody should jump on board with here. One guy who does not know who I am or what my show is about decided that he was going to send me a message here, and I'm trying to find where it went now, because I'm kind of pulling this up on a whim. It looks like he might have deleted it because I let him have it. But I said, Schumer and Jeffries need to come out and say, not that they're against that Donald Trump did this without Congress's permission, that they're against the war in general. You cannot find me very many liberals. I can point you to Bernie Sanders. I can point you to Grant Plattner. I can point you to AOC, who are willing to say they are outright against the war. There are very few liberals. Show me Cory Booker saying the war is bad, right? Show me Hakeem Jeffries saying the war is bad. They'll say the practice is bad. They will say, oh, doing this without Congress, that sets a bad example. Show me an example of liberals saying that this shouldn't be happening, and I might be able to put you to a path forward. But the fact is, this is why AIPAC invests billions of dollars into our election cycle. But as long as they're not Russian or wear red trucker hats, it turns out that it's not illegal. Funny how that works. We have to go to break. I'm very late to break. A very short break, and then we're going to come right back. So everybody, don't move. We're going to come back in just a couple of minutes. Not even. Looks like what? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. We're going to be back. 920-281-1150. 920-281-1150. If anyone has any thoughts. I haven't had a chance to get into the AI conversation yet, which is going to feel kind of muted given what we've been talking about all day. But I bet you I can tie it into what I've been talking about the entire hour and a half here. So stick around. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. I found the comment I was referencing from Beefy G on TikTok. So wanting politicians to follow the rules is a waste of time? Is that what you want? Governance without rules, procedure, or decorum? No, I want an actual anti-war party. There's a very famous social media post where somebody posts, I love pancakes. And then underneath someone says, oh, so you hate waffles? And there's a lot of cusses in it, so I can't say the whole thing. But it's like, no, that's an entirely different sentence than the one I typed. You just superimposed that onto the point that I was making. I posted a video of me essentially saying we need to see more condemnation from Schumer and Jeffries about the war in general and not the fact that rules were not followed, because that says to me, as long as Donald Trump asked Congress, then the war would be acceptable, despite the fact that 70% of the population doesn't want to see it. So, and honestly, if anything, I think I'm underestimating the exact extent to who doesn't want to see it, but that's just based on the most recent polling data that I have come across. Now, the entire program today has kind of stemmed from reporting about how much outside influence, how much super PAC money has been funneled into politics. And we used the Illinois primaries as an example 57 million. Largest, of course, donor, individual donor, I should say, being AIPAC. Third largest individual operation was artificial intelligence, just at 2.5 million this time around, but something tells me it's going to get much more egregious as this becomes less popular. And everybody's got a different reason, whether it is the escalating energy costs, whether it is the environmental impact, whether for this particular talk show host, it is about the surveillance. It is about creating a digital prison. It is about using our tax dollars to build essentially a digital operation that is going to assess whether or not we are a risk in the future, because we have the guts to say maybe America shouldn't be fighting Israel's war. And will that get you labeled as a threat to whatever system has been put in place? You know, there was a woman who was just released from jail earlier this week who spent a year in prison in a federal detention center without being charged for a crime because she wrote an op-ed calling for the genocide in Gaza to stop. All of this, of course, happening under the free speech Trump administration. So I'm sure MAGA has been up in arms since then. But in America, as if we weren't a third world ass country enough already, we've now got people spending a year of their life, the younger part of their life, the active part, the part when you're starting to build experiences. And, well, if you're a boomer, when you started to accrue wealth and do things like that, spent in prison without a charge because she had the audacity to say end the genocide. Is building these data centers going to lend itself to that? No way to know for sure, but almost definitely. You know, that was tongue in cheek, but I kind of mean it. Research is out, though, and this I find absolutely fascinating. Because as I've been highlighting, you don't want to be the guy that pushes back against the internet, but you also need to acknowledge a problem when a problem is there. And David Shore, who is the head of data science at Blue Rose Research based out in New York, he has some polling data that deserves way more attention than what it is getting. So I'm using my platform to shine a spotlight. I'm only familiarizing myself with Blue Rose Research now, but it does seem like it is a credible operation. And I find the findings of this particular polling data specifically fascinating. This is the question. Which should be the government's more important priority in managing the growth of artificial intelligence? Okay. Essentially assuming that it is a guarantee. And I feel like that's a fair assumption. You really can't close Pandora's box, right? That's kind of the whole point of that story. There are two options. Well, three, counting not sure, but I've got my opinion. So the not sure people, what are you guys doing? Option A. The government's priority should be providing help for the American workers that lose their job by funding the creation of new jobs and basic benefits like healthcare, even if it means limiting the amount that American tech companies can profit from AI. Option B. Providing incentives for American tech companies to keep innovating so that America outcompetes the rest of the world in developing AI, even if it allows tech companies to profit while eliminating jobs in the U.S. So the options are AI companies either use some of the profits that they are obviously going to generate because they no longer are paying overhead. Keep in mind, the Democracy Dies at the Washington Post article that came out earlier this week says that asking for an increase in the minimum wage will take away jobs. Meanwhile, Amazon is already intending to replace 40% of their workforce with automation in the coming years, regardless of what happens with the minimum wage. Go get that dollar is what I'm saying. 58% of people overall are in favor of profiting the people impacted by AI more so than AI. It's 58 to 20. Everybody else is in the I don't know category. When you break it down by who you voted for president, for Harris, it's 67 to 15. For swing voter, it's 56 to 23. And this is what was mind-blowing to me. Trump voter, 50 to 24. No matter which demographic, the lowest number you get is a direct majority, is 50% of the population, with 26% of people who voted for Trump saying they don't know. If 1% of those people decide fund the people, boom, we got ourselves a majority even on the Trump side there. Nobody cares about keeping up with the rest of the world in regards to the creation of AI, because there's one fundamental problem that gets lost in all of this. And it's kind of why the name Outside the Box even exists. We were able to exist without AI. And like, it's a very existential conversation to have with yourself, right? Because we should be excited that there's a chance that this technology is coming around to take some of the jobs that a lot of people wouldn't want to do, a lot of jobs that people are doing begrudgingly, whatever the situation is. We should be excited that those jobs are getting eliminated. But are we excited? No, we're terrified because we don't know what the workforce is going to be like. I couldn't imagine, and I don't want to, I don't like, all right, like, I'm just saying, I'm picking an age at random here. I couldn't imagine having an 8-year-old today and trying to tell them what they need to do to make sure that they are on point for the future. Because I'm old enough to remember 10 years ago when the line was, "Oh, you mad because Obama's closing your coal mines? Okay, fine. Well, learn to code and you'll be good." There's a lot of programs teaching people how to code. What I'd hate to be is the coal miner that turned himself into a coder only to find out that AI already right now can do such a large percentage of your job, and it's only a matter of time before you're learning a new skill again at a pace that is not comparable to another period of time. Nobody knows if this is all hype to just sell a product that to this point shows no promise of being profitable, or is it an inevitable outcome that we all need to start planning for today? I'd like to think a job like this one can't be replicated by AI, but I don't know. If I write enough articles, if I put enough content on the internet, is this thing going to be able to learn exactly how I think, the way I'd react to stuff, and be able to churn out a show that's a little more polished that people want to listen to? I don't know. Probably. You see people making fun of it now, but that's like making fun of the original Nintendo. Look how stupid this Mario character looks. Okay, fine. Look what Mario looks like in 2026, and you tell me. You know, like, there's an element to this, and the fact that 58% of the overall population, 2/3 of Democrats, 56% of independents, and even 50% of MAGA, I thought that was socialism, but it turns out that we can kind of see it with this one here, and rightfully so. It's a scary reality to have to contend with, that nobody is really prepared for. I mean, that's the simplest way that I could examine it. Ben, I see you trying to make this about trans people. Snap out of it. Snap out of it, Manchurian Candidate. Snap out of it, Manchurian Candidate. Waka waka trans. Waka waka trans. If I had an 8-year-old in Appleton, Ben, I'd be voting for the candidate that shows me the best prospect for a future. I wouldn't be voting for the candidate that bases their entire personality on 8 trans athletes in the NCAA. I have far too much respect for myself to allow that to be my number one voting priority in America when a president is starting a war of choice in the Middle East for no reason other than he's kind of an idiot. So, waka waka is my response to that. But in any event, and Brian is saying most economists are predicting that there will be no profits in the AI race. That could happen. I am not claiming to be an expert. I am not claiming to have all of the answers on this. What I do know I am watching happen is the people are waking up to this. Whether it is the environmental impact, the usage of our water, whether it's the economics of it all and energy bills shooting through the roof, whatever the factors are, people are waking up to the fact that they don't want this. And there could be a mass unemployment crisis on the other side of it. And rather than putting our hands up or doing the Democrats' favorite thing, trying to play catch up, get ahead of it now. Again, The policies are obvious that are winning. Be against this war. Be in favor of making sure that millions of Americans are not left high and dry when AI eventually starts to take root in economies. And make sure that Appleton high schools have at least 5 trans athletes per sports. Those are the winning categories. It's just a matter of making sure that the Democratic Party can get on board with it, because you know what Tom Tiffany's talking about? Something trans and something mail-in ballots. Just have a platform that is popular, and let's leave a lot of the wondering to the wayside. We have to squeeze one more break in here. We'll have a short segment on the other side, put a bow on this program here, and we'll call it a day. Stay right where you are. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHPY and Political Voices Network. DSL and I were going back and forth. He says you better develop a skill in a labor job because all the white collar jobs are going to go first. And a lot of signs are pointing to that. The administrative side of things tends to go that way. But so what I highlighted to him was that's absolutely the way that it would go. And what people would do is, you've kind of already seen this with the astronomical cost of college, is you're seeing people encourage trade schools, working with your hands. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. To be frank, in certain industries, that's a pretty surefire way to make a living, depending on the neck of the woods that you find yourself living in. But as that becomes the MO, the modus operandi for a lot of people entering the workforce, all of a sudden then you're going to find yourself with a glut of manual laborers in an industry with all fairly comparable skill levels. So how do you stand out in that industry once there's enough people doing it? Well, it's a race to the bottom for prices, right? And around and around and around we go. Rather than playing this constantly chasing our tail game while we watch 12 people get all of our money, maybe we should address the 12 people getting all of our money and then go from there. Isn't it interesting? I shared a clip from this on my socials yesterday. I did an episode of this show 2 weeks ago. It was March 3rd, where I brought up a bill proposed by Ro Khanna in the House, Sanders in the Senate, with a 5% wealth tax on 978 billionaires. You can tax 978 people 5% of their wealth, and over the course of 10 years make $4.4 trillion. And then it proceeded to lay out exactly how you would spend the money. Now, it didn't say anything about trans people, so there's a good chance a lot of Republicans didn't actually see that bill. But isn't it suspicious that we did that segment on March 3rd? We did almost an hour about it. And here we are on March 18th. I'm going to be honest with you. Outside the box, what have you heard about that legislation? Where have you heard anything about just a 5% tax raising $4.4 trillion with no intention of putting it into the military industrial complex or cycling it back into the hands of a handful of wealthy people? Where have you seen that coverage outside of this program? That should probably give the entire game away right there. We're chasing our tails here. It's like, oh, well, if AI's coming, then you better not do X, Y, or Z job. Okay, great, until the next X, Y, or Z job is also in danger. And this is going to be a lot faster. To be perfectly frank, radio has been told that it's collapsing for the last 50 years, and yet we're still here. And in some ways, it's very popular with people. People are talking about outside the box on the airplane. You just got to keep up with the times. This is something entirely different. It's going to be very fast. It's going to be very sudden. And everyone's going to act like it was unforeseeable and there's nothing. What? Could we ask Elon Musk to not be a trillionaire? What is this? Communist China? I'm saying we're left with a lot to desire in this country, and some people, not DSL, but some people are willing to play their part for the establishment. Maybe they don't even realize they're kissing billionaire ass, but unfortunately, it's the reality we find ourselves in. With that, we're going to call it a show on that happy note. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the entire thing, it's of course going to be available on the WHBY app, and I have my own YouTube page now at Ben Cominos that we live stream, and then it just stays up on the page after that. And it'll be on Political Voices Network not until 3 p.m. today because of some scheduling conflicts, but it will be up there with a lot more bells and whistles and a little bit of production value added to it. Just keep that outside the box element in your life the entire time, and we will be back tomorrow. Fox Valley Data Exchange joins us right at the top, 8:35, and Haley Tenpass is up next, so stick around for that. You're listening to Outside the Box here on WHBY and Political Voices Network.